Okay, before we go on, I want to say two things. One is I didn't do a good job of explaining anulomang. So in this sentence, in this clause, the Blessed One turned his attention carefully to Paticcasamuppada, which we talked about a little bit. And this word describes Paticcasamuppada. The idea here is in the natural order. So, or in order. That is, there is a way to talk about this in a reverse order. And that, I believe, happens in the second sutta of this chapter of the Udana. So anyway, I hope that clarifies a little bit about how anulomang is being used. I think it could just be like an adjective modifying this, or maybe adverbially, but it's still going with paticcasamuppada. Okay, and then the next thing I want to say is, of this teaching of the paticcasamuppada, we're just going to take this part of it. And this will get the ball rolling, so to speak. We'll see how the rest of this unfolds from this kind of formula. And also, it's going to keep this from being monstrously long. It'll still be long, dear listener, and I apologize for that. So we start with this word iti. In this case, it means thus, and you could almost think about it as like colons. It's we're talking about paticcasamuppada in order, colon, and it's what follows here. So now at the beginning, we have imasmiṃ sati idaṃ hoti. So I've put this in italics because this is a locative absolute. A locative absolute has two parts. It's going to have some sort of noun or pronoun in the locative case, and then it's going to have a participle also put in the locative case. So here we have imasmiṃ, neuter nominative, neuter locative singular. I just said it had to be locative. And this is demonstrative pronoun this. And then we have this participle, also neuter locative singular. This is from the verb to be. The root is like as, us. So here, you could kind of think about this as the subject of this being. Now, we can easily understand the locative part because these are in the locative case. The absolute part means that this is not grammatically connected to the rest of the sentence. And that's important. That's going to come up in just a minute. So this being. Now, in English, that doesn't make a ton of sense. In English, we tend to sort of clarify the relationship between this absolute and the, let's say, the main part of the sentence or clause. What I mean by clarifying the relationship is, instead of saying this being, we might say something like while this is. So that's kind of a temporal thing, or concessive would be although this is or exists. Something like that. That's what we're talking about when we say that we're going to clarify the relationship here. So then in the main part of this sentence, idaṃ hoti. So idaṃ, it's really the same kind of word. It's the nominative, it's neuter nominative singular demonstrative pronoun, this, and then hoti, third person singular present active indicative, is. This is, and now you can see why we might want to clarify, because this exists. And that's usually how this is taken in the Paticcasamuppada. Because this exists, this is or exists. Now, again, in English, that can be confusing because we've used the word this twice. In Pali, it's not, because as I was saying earlier, this is not the subject of this. So they're not talking about the same thing. Again, that's not real clear in English. So to make that even clearer, sometimes we'll say or you'll read, because that exists, this exists. Something like that. You could almost imagine, like, we could almost use the same word, and you could imagine the Buddha or someone pointing and saying, because this exists, this exists. In that way, it wouldn't be, it would be very clear, I think. Okay, I think that's, I hope I didn't muddle that too much. Then we have imassuppādā, idaṃ uppajjati. Here, I think we're just sort of missing an imassuppādā. These have just kind of been run together. It's not really a compound. They've just been kind of elided in speech. Maybe a contraction, if you want to think of it that way. So we have, again, idaṃ, this, uppajjati, third person singular present active indicative, exists, really arises. So this arises, and then this word uppādā, related to uppajjati, due to the arising. And then, like I said, this is imassa, this is a genitive singular here, neuter genitive singular demonstrative pronoun, the arising of this. And this is in the ablative, and ablatives are used sometimes to express cause. So because of the arising of this, this thing arises. And then we get this word yadidaṃ. It's really a compound, but namely as follows. And then, as I said, dear listener, we're just going to take this first part of the Paticcasamuppada, and this formula is going to hold pretty much until the end. So we have avijjāpaccayā saṅkhārā. Saṅkhārā, compounded things. So this is a masculine plural here. These endings look the same. This is masculine plural, but this one's actually in the ablative. So saṅkhārā, compounded things, that is everything. That's our experience of reality. That's our emotions, our mental states, our feelings. That's the world, any aspect of the world we can kind of think about or touch or in any way sense. Everything is a compounded thing. It's either formed of parts or it's not going to last. So that is the saṅkhārā. And so we might even, like, again, if we had to sort of annotate this, we might say reality as we know it. And then paccayā is a cause. And not just a cause, but due to, because this is an ablative here, due to the cause, or we might just say because of, and the first part of this, avijjā, ignorance. So I might have muddled that a little, but if we actually just put it in this order here, in the Pali order, it might make more sense. Due to ignorance, because of ignorance, compounded things, reality. And then we're going to have to understand probably one of these verbs. Reality exists because of ignorance. Our reality exists because of ignorance. One consequence of this, a big consequence of this, is that everything that we experience, our reality, is a result of our misunderstanding how things actually are. And one of the final results of this misunderstanding is our experience of dukkha, our experience of like mild to intense forms of suffering, of uneasiness. And so if you think about what the Buddha's teaching is, or like what would you say the goal is? The goal is to overcome the avijjā. And that's why sometimes we hear, and I think Buddhaghosa says this, is that the Buddha delivered this teaching by means of sila, by means of virtue, samadhi, by meditational practices, and by paññā, by wisdom. And it's this wisdom that all of the Buddha's teaching is trying to have us develop, or trying to instill in us some wisdom. Not the kind of wisdom or knowledge that we can just gain by reading something. This is our virtue and our meditation, our samadhi, our mindfulness play huge part in this. But the goal is to remove this ignorance. And when that ignorance is removed, then our misperception of reality is removed. Or another way to say that is, when our ignorance is removed, then we will see things as they actually are.